Alright, so now let's get started with the important component of our analysis of each act, and this is the passage interpretation. Now, one quick reminder I have for you out there is to go back and check out section 5, where we learned about the importance of soliloquies. The soliloquy that we analyzed in section 5 actually occurs in Act 3. It's Macbeth's third soliloquy, where he contemplates his anxiety over Banquo and the part of the prophecy from the witches where they say that Banquo will father a line of kings. I think that most people would agree that this is the obvious choice for the most important passage in Act 3. But since we've already taken a look at that speech in depth, I want to take a look at a conversation between Macbeth and the murderer. So, this passage takes place when Macbeth meets with the two murderers and instructs them to kill Banquo and Fleance in secret. A couple of things I want to point out. First of all, Lady Macbeth does not know that Macbeth plans to kill Banquo at this point. Macbeth hints at it in the next scene, but at this point she doesn't know, unlike their plan to murder Duncan, which both of them devised together and planned together. I also want to comment really quickly on the picture we have here. This is a still from Orson Welles' version of Macbeth. Orson Welles is a famous director. You may have heard of Citizen Kane. That's kind of his masterwork. And he directed and starred in, this is him, as Macbeth, a very famous version of Macbeth that I encourage you to check out. You can see the crazed look on Orson Welles' face here as he plays Macbeth. And here he is talking with the murderer. So let's take a look at this conversation that occurs in Act 3, Scene 1. So the conversation begins with the second murderer and the first murderer describing themselves. In a sense, this conversation is like a job interview. The second murderer says, "I am one, my liege," this means my king or my lord. "I am one, my liege, whom the vile blows and buffets of the world hath so incensed that I am reckless what I do to spite the world." Okay, so even if we don't understand exactly what this sentence means, we can pick out some really important words, right? Vile means evil. Buffets means attacks or strikes. Incensed means angered. Reckless means careless and dangerous in action. And spite means hatred. Okay, so all of these words here characterize the second murderer as an evil man. And it's significant that Macbeth is sicking this evil man on his friend Banquo. The first murderer, "So weary with disasters, tugged with fortune, that I would set my life on any chance to mend it or be rid of it." Okay? And again, the "on" here, this preposition, we would gloss today to mean of. What I want to point out about this first murder, what he says, is that it almost describes Macbeth's situation, right? He says that he's so weary with disasters, right? And remember, a disaster is a word that's linked to fate and chaos when we gloss Shakespeare's English. Tugged with fortune. So tugged means pulled by, and fortune means fate, right? That I would set my life on any chance. In other words, he would risk his life on any chance to mend it or be rid of it. So to mend means to fix. And of course, to be rid of your life is to die. So what this murderer is saying, right, it's the first murderer, but in this conversation, he's speaking second. He's saying, I have suffered so much by fate that I am at a point where I will risk my life because I would rather be dead or fix my fate than continue to suffer. And we see Macbeth kind of at that moment here too. In the next scene, he's going to talk with Lady Macbeth about how much he's suffering and how unhappy he is and how his mind is full of scorpions. And we can see the action that he takes as kind of reckless, right? Dictated by fate and almost seeming as if he would rather die than continue to live in fear that Banquo's sons could take over the crown of Scotland. Okay? One more thing I want to point out here, and I'll use a different color to make it clearer, is that in the poetry of the drama, right, you'll notice that the second murderer's line stops here. And then the first murderer begins speaking here. This is because, in a poetic sense, they're sharing the line of the poetry, right? This is a play, but Shakespeare's language occurs in poetry. And then when the first murderer stops speaking, here, Macbeth continues speaking this third line. So what's interesting here is that the structure of the dialogue suggests that Macbeth and these two murderers are really interwoven in their fate, right? They're almost acting together as one entity. So it makes sense that the way the murderers are describing themselves and the way we're coming to see Macbeth seems so similar. It also gives a little bit of evidence for scholars who argue that Macbeth is the third murderer who arrives anonymously on the scene to kill Banquo and attempt to kill Fleance, right? They seem so stitched together in their words, in their descriptions, and even in the structure of the dialogue, okay? But let's take a look at the content of Macbeth's speech, which continues here. So Macbeth says, "No, Banquo was your enemy." One significant part of Macbeth's speech here is that he uses the past tense was, right? This shows confidence. Banquo is still alive, but Macbeth is speaking of him in the past tense, perhaps because he's so sure that Banquo is going to die. And both murderers, again, picking up the line, say, "True, my lord." And Macbeth really explains why he's hiring murderers to kill Banquo, whereas earlier he committed the murder of Duncan by himself. He's explaining his motive. "So is he mine," right? He, of course, here is Banquo. And mine, he means my enemy. "And in such bloody distance that every minute of his being thrusts against my nearest of life." In other words, every minute that Banquo is alive harms Macbeth, fills his mind with scorpions, makes him feel paranoid and wary that he's going to be killed or that he's defiled his mind for a fruitless crown. "Though I could with barefaced power sweep him from my sight." So here, we're using kind of metaphorical language. We're saying barefaced power. Barefaced means unconcealed. Right? We're almost personifying power here. Sweep him from my sight means that he could easily have Banquo killed openly without concealing it. Why? Well, because he's the king. Right? He wears the crown, and therefore, whatever he wants is okay, right? He's sacrosanct. He can have anyone killed at his pleasure. But he explains that this would cause political problems. "Yet I must not kill him openly, for certain friends that are both his and mine," so friends that are mine and his, and here he's talking about the Scottish nobility, right? "Whose loves I may not drop, but wail his fall, who I myself struck down." So in other words, he cannot drop the love of the friends he has in common with Banquo, the Scottish nobility, because then they will turn against him. "And thence it is that I to your assistance do make love, masking the business from the common eye, for sundry weighty reasons." So, I to your assistance do make love. I am seeking your assistance. He's speaking to the murderers, because he wants to mask the business, right? What is the business? He's used this word business to allude to murder before. To mask the business means to conceal the murder of Banquo and Fleance, right? For sundry weighty reasons. Sundry means many here. For many important reasons, okay? So this is significant for a number of reasons. First of all, we're seeing that Macbeth has really laid out a careful, cruel plan. We're seeing that, in a sense, he's no longer the loyal, reasonable general that we meet at the beginning of the play. He's no longer a general. Now he's so similar in his words and in his conversation with the lowest, basest murderer and assassin, right? If you look at professional killers, the general in the king's army would be the most noble of them. And then a secret assassin who's hired by people to commit illegal murders would be the lowest. So the status of Macbeth is dropping. Moreover, it's important to take a look at this because we can compare it to Macbeth's next murder later in the play, which is the murder of Macduff's family. And even though Macbeth has already fallen so far in his character, he's going to fall even lower when he murders Macduff's family, because that's an even more reckless murder. There is no plan or strategy there, really. And in fact, as we're going to see, it's only going to incense Macduff and bring him and his army against Macbeth in Act 5. So, today we took a look at Act 3. We gave a synopsis of its key scenes. We took a look at moments for further analysis throughout. We remembered that earlier we had analyzed Macbeth's soliloquy in Act 3, Scene 1 in Section 5 of our course, and I encourage you to go back to Section 5 and review it. And we also took a look at a conversation between Macbeth and the murderers. And this is an indication, I think, that it's not only the high soliloquies that give a lot of important information about Macbeth and characters. Here in a conversation with the murderers, which isn't among the top 10 greatest speeches in this tragedy, we still find a lot of important meaning and a lot of parallels that show that our once noble and reasonable General Macbeth is now almost on the same level as the dirtiest, lowest murderers. Thanks, I'm Edward Dunnigan, together with the Bund Education, and I look forward to seeing you in our next section when we take a look at Act 4.